because I was invited to take part in this wonderful storytelling festival, but I didn't know how many stories Georgians had to tell. I think Georgia isn't reflected enough in the stream of world news. When you have like a frozen conflict, as you have here with Abkhazia and South Ossetia, it becomes hard to cover it as news because that's the point, isn't it? It's frozen, nothing's changing. Well, I like to be where history is happening. I think we've only got one life and you might as well be somewhere where it's all going on. I don't think it is more dangerous for a woman than a man. I think it's pretty much the same. The mortar that killed my friend Marie Colvin, whose biography I wrote, it also killed a young French photographer, Rémi Ochlik, who's a man. It did not discriminate by gender. So I don't see much difference there. But I have always liked being in those places, and I think it really matters. Otherwise, you just have this sense that, these are far off places of which we know very little. I think that the world is one, and it's really important that we should understand what's going on in these different parts of the world, and that's my motivation. Now, more people are reporting on their own countries, and that is receiving an international audience. And this, I think, is really good, because you've got increasing numbers of people who are bilingual with, Arabic and French, or Persian and English. And these people are able to tell their own stories. They're like bridge people. And I think that this is a tremendously positive development, that it isn't always outsiders going in and coming out, and this division between them and us, I think, is breaking down, and that's very positive for journalism. When you had the terrorist attacks at the Bataclan in Paris, that was a massive story internationally, and I think it was right that it was a massive story internationally. More Chinese people go to Paris, go to France, than anywhere else in the world. This is a place which loads and loads of people go to, and that's why I think it's absolutely right that there should be a lot of attention paid to a terror attack happening in Paris. Now, there are terror attacks which happen in other places, and I have covered many of them. For example, in Beirut, you sometimes have terror attacks. People say, well, why do people make not so much fuss about them? Well, you don't get the vast numbers of visitors going to Beirut that you do to Paris, and we do cover them, but we don't cover them in the same detail. But there are always these uncovered stories. There's always like a wasp in my head the whole time going zzz, telling me about the stories which I haven't covered. And so this is what I'm always aware of. Khartoum, what happened in Sudan. Now, Sudan was covered a lot, and that's really important. And most of it was covered by Sudanese reporters. There's a new generation of brilliant Sudanese reporters, many of whom, if not most of whom, are women. They are covering that story and it's getting out there. But it's inevitable that for a Western audience, they're going to be interested in places where they are likely to be affected. I think that's just the way it is. Look, in my job, I face risk. Anybody who goes to a war zone faces risk. But one of the things which I find interesting as I get older is I take fewer risks now than I used to. I used to take ridiculous risks when I was young because I thought I was bulletproof. I thought I had the whole world ahead of me, and now of course I have lost a lot of friends, and I have, mainly I lost my friend Marie Colvin, who was killed by a mortar in 2012 in Syria, a mortar fired by the Syrian government. And so I take fewer risks these days than I used to, and I think maybe that's just part of growing up. Balance is a part of all kinds of journalism, whether you are reporting the local council in some small town in Georgia or the war in Iraq. And it's important to speak to as many people as you can from all the different sides. And there's usually not two sides, there's usually dozens of sides. But I don't apologize for trying to work out what the truth is in amongst all of this. And the truth is not, this person said this and this person said that. The truth is what really happened, and that's why you're interviewing all of those people. I'm not neutral. I'm trying to find out what happened. I'm certainly not neutral when it comes to the bombing of children. I'm certainly not neutral when it comes to using poison gas against a civilian population. I was in Rwanda during the genocide. What am I supposed to say? On the one hand, it's a bad idea to try and wipe out all of the Tutsi population. On the other hand, maybe it was a good thing. Of course I'm not going to say that. I'm not neutral. This is an evil. And part of our job as journalists is to expose the wrongdoing of powerful warlords. But one thing I think you should never do as a journalist is attach yourself to a cause, because that is not good journalism, and also because you will be disappointed, because in the end, men with power will always let you down. And they may seem like the most romantic rebels at the beginning, and in the end they will become corrupted by power like the people who they overthrew. I think it's really difficult for all of us to know what to read and what to watch and what to listen to. And as journalists, all you can do is try and do the best story and the most original story you can. But yes, you do have to try and constantly find ways of hooking people in. And the main way of hooking people in is people. You know, the compelling personal story. That is what people relate to. If you want to be a journalist, that's great. But don't try and run before you can walk. So, you know, find out what's happening locally or some country that you're interested in, and start, you know, learning and building up your contacts and so on, and do all of that. History is coming to us. History is happening right where we are. And to Georgians, I would say, understand your own society, because in the end, for democracy, what's really important is that journalists they're finding out about corruption. They're finding out about power. They're challenging their own leaders. That's the real job of journalists, and the most important part of it is in our own countries, our own societies. As a correspondent who covers a lot of conflict, of course I'm always looking, where's the next conflict? Where's the next place which I have to go to tell these stories? But the best thing would be if there were no conflicts, if there were no stories, then I could just come horse riding in Georgia on holiday.